Well, hey, folks, welcome back to What's Next Beyond Service. This is episode number 24 called Aim High in Service. And today, our guest is Ryan Burke. Ryan is a United States Air Force veteran, and he's currently serving as a police officer in South Carolina. His time in the Air Force was about 6.5 years. He was in the security forces. I actually served in the security forces for the Marine Corps for a portion of my career. So, we've got that in common, I guess. Ryan is also an electrician, and he's a member of the IBEW, International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. And so with that, I want to welcome Ryan to our show. Ryan, welcome. And we're very happy to have you on here today.
I appreciate it, Scott. Thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to our discussion today.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, with that, let's get into your military service. As you know, this show is about transition from military service. For the most part. Now, we also talk with people who are law enforcement officers and who served either a career or some portion of time as a police officer, and then they've transitioned. So transition's kind of the main thing. The cog in the wheel, so to speak. And I also talk with military spouses, because military spouses serve too. Absolutely. Whether it's a husband or wife, they go through the transition when the family goes through. So it's important for people to have that perspective too. So that's always, I think it's a good thing. Transition affects so many people, and it's a unique thing for the military, and it's unique, I think, also for first responders, because other folks don't necessarily go through such changes, when it comes to going to the next job, right? Just because of what we do in the fields that we serve when you're a veteran or a first responder. So, okay, let's talk about your time in the Air Force. Again, I mentioned that you served about 6.5 years. You were in security forces. Give us some background in terms of, what that was all about. And then, if you have any stories that you want to share about your service, any significant things, or, whatever touches your fancy there.
So I'm gonna actually take it back for a second before I started my military service.
Sure.
So it was a kind of ironic. Growing up when I was a little kid, I actually have a extensive Marine Corps population in my family. So growing up when I was probably pre-10 years old, I was always like, I'm going to be a Marine. I want to be a Marine. They're the biggest. They're the biggest. They're the best. That was my thought.
Well, you were right, but
of course, I was just like
not the biggest, but certainly the best.
But of course, I was a little kid with aspirations, and that's where my whole interest in the military started. And then, particularly for me, growing up, my father was an electrician in New York City. He's an retired IBEW guy, so I always took an interest to that, and I'll kind of transition to that here in a little while. And the city was kind of close and ultimately home for most of my family, because all my family grew up in the city. My parents, when they got married, they moved to where I grew up about an hour north, and then my father commuted back and forth to the city. So, we had 9/11 that happened. And when 9/11 happened, I mean, that was my deciding factor. I was only freshman in high school, but that was my deciding factor. I said, I'm joining the military. I'm doing something. So as my teen years progressed, I was like, okay, well, I was, a high school athlete. But I knew I wanted to join the military, but I wanted to do sports. So I was kind of juggling that. And initially I was going to just do the Air National Guard, move down here to South Carolina when my parents retired, and go to college, do the Guard, and find a career path from there. And then the active duty Air Force recruiter called me and said, hey, blah, 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 convinced me to go active duty. Mind you, this was 2 weeks before I was supposed to go to basic training anyways. So it wasn't a huge change as far as going from Guard to active, but it was kind of oh, by the way, Mom, I'm going active duty. just so you know, kind of dropped that bombshell on her. And she was like, what? Of course, 2007, when I graduated high school, we're kind of still in the height of, the war on terrorism and, our Middle Eastern presence and stuff like that. So, but
Yeah, absolutely.
she came on board. She's like, you know what? That's the best thing for you. You really don't have any aspirations to stay in school, which I really didn't. I was that kind of kid. So I joined the Air Force, December of 2007. I left for basic training. Did my basic training, went through my security forces training, and got my first assignment to Incirlik Air Base, Turkey. That's down in the southern central part of Turkey. For those of you who kind of want that geographic position, we actually bordered Syria and I believe it was Iraq on that end. I'm not,
Right.
too geographically sound.
So you weren't sitting on the Mediterranean, in other words.
No, I was not that fortunate.
Yeah.
We did actually get lost and cross into Syria coming back from the beach one day, though.
Oh, geez. Yeah, that could have been fun.
But so I got assigned to Incirlik Air Base, Turkey, where I was. For those of you who don't know this, that is actually a nuclear base where we have nuclear assets. The primary aircraft or airframe coming in and out of there is the C-17, the big cargo. So it was a strategic location for our nuclear enterprise. It was obviously part of the NATO agreement. So it was it was really cool. We got to work with the Turkish Air Force very closely. And even some of our base patrols were actually joint patrols with actually a Turkish Air Force member sitting next to you in the car and patrolling.
Let me ask you a quick question. Has this come to mind in listening to you, and what you're saying about being in Turkey? What was your impression of their military?
So every time I rode with a Turkish Air Force guy, 3 hours into shift, he'd be asleep. So my impression was not very strong.
Right.
But the Turkish people and being able to work with these guys and develop a relationship with these guys was very cool, particularly during the Ramadan season, which is one of their major religious holidays.
Sure.
Obviously, they fast all day and then they eat once the sun goes down, and they're very welcoming. Come eat. I mean, and if you left the table hungry, that was your fault, because I mean it was awesome on that aspect. But as far as maybe a military standpoint, I didn't really have a fond impression of them because, like I said, 3 hours into shift, they're sitting in the passenger seat sleeping, and you're just staring at this guy snoring, and you're trying to, do your job. So,
well, I guess you made him feel comfortable. He says, he knew he could rely on you. So,
but Turkey was very interesting. It was a 15-month tour. We got to experience. I got to experience a lot. Going off base, experience the culture, experience the food, which I absolutely miss. I think the Turkish food is probably some of the best food in the world, if you ever get a chance to try it. But it was, at first, I guess you could say, transitioning into the military. First duty station, 18 years old. I get off the airplane in Turkey. Well, not even that. I get on an airplane in Istanbul to fly down to Incirlik. And it's like shag carpets and like pull shades on the airplane. And I'm like, what the heck is this? So it was definitely a culture shock. And then I even, first landing in Turkey, I mean, you see the family of four driving down the road in a moped. I mean, they're making a 2-lane road into a 4-lane road. It was a culture shock.
right.
It was a lot of fun. Nice thing in the Air Force, though, is once you do a short tour, whether it's a 12 or 15-month tour, you get a base of preference. After that, the Air Force pretty much says, hey, where do you want to go after this? And we'll send you there. So I elected to go to Aviano Air Base, Italy, which was it's another nuclear NATO base. We primarily had we had 2 squadrons of F-16s out there, which was absolutely awesome to watch. That was a 3-year tour. Particularly out there, we some of the cooler, or I don't want to say cooler, but more interesting aspects we got to experience was, I forgot the name of the operation, but it was when the NATO forces actually dropped the bombs on Libya, killing Gaddafi.
Right.
Aviano Air Base was the headquarters for that. So we had,
I remember that. Yeah.
British Air Force. We had, the Jordanian Air Force with their F-22s. I mean, we had the Navy there. It was really cool to see all this joint efforts to support such a from what I can say, is what I thought was a great cause. And it was absolutely amazing watching these fighter planes take off loaded with ammunitions and coming back, and all you see is the drop pins. I mean,
Right.
it was very impressive. And it was a lot of fun. Obviously, I was in the heart of Europe, so I was fortunate enough to see 28 European countries, 10 of them on the
Holy
military,
smokes.
10 of them on the military's dime, most of them on mine, but I mean, it wasn't very expensive to travel over there doing that stuff. So that was a lot of fun.
Right.
But,
Yeah. When I was in security forces, I had the opportunity, because we have a lot of, companies and detachments that were in Europe. So I was on an inspection team, and we got to go do inspections, like 3 day, 4 day, well, usually 3, but sometimes 4 day inspections. So yeah, we were in Italy at what was the Naples, or Napoli, right? That was one of our companies there, and got to go to Sorrento, and that was beautiful. I'd never
yes.
been to Italy before, and I think I could have stayed there. And talk about food, right? And
Yeah.
I love the Italian culture. I think I may have in a previous life been Italian. I don't know,
Yeah. So
but yeah, I'm with you on that. Yeah.
actually too, and like kind of what you're saying, one of the jobs that I got to do when the 10 countries I saw in the military's dime, I was part of what we called a Tiger team. We
Hmm.
would go to these installations, we would evaluate, assess, and implement their physical security policies and procedures in the way they did things to help them become upstand as their person on their own for a military installation. Italy was kind of the takeoff point for my military career. I got there, I got certified for my response force membership or members for the base. I went there, became an alarm monitor for our nuclear assets, and then I became a area supervisor. So I was actually supervising the security forces patrols that were assigned to the nuclear assets. And that was about 30 to 40 people that I was supervising on a daily basis in my single area. So that was really a good takeoff point where I really got to learn to be a supervisor, got to really learn how to be a leader. Really went through a lot of growing pains as far as being able to communicate with my, fellow enlisted members and, the guys that I was supervising, and really took my career off as far as being a good leader and getting those leadership qualities that the military always advertises, that says, hey, we're going to teach you we're going to give you leadership skills. We're going to give you all these skills. So that's where it started to really come into perspective. I had supervisors that were very hard on me that really, wanted to see me succeed and grow, because I guess they saw some untapped potential that I had no idea I had. I mean, I still don't know what they saw, but they definitely made me better. But that was really
You're too modest.
my takeoff point in my career, which was
Well,
absolutely awesome. I mean,
and Ryan, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the other thing is, think about the significance of your job too at that point. Doing what you were doing. Anytime you're interfacing with something, with our nuclear capability, that's probably one of the most significant things that we concern ourselves with, in the military. And a lot of that kind of flies under the radar for most folks. Yeah, we have nuclear weapons, but they don't really have any understanding of what that means. Now, obviously, you drop a nuclear weapon, it's not going to be good, but they don't understand everything that's happening in the background with, making sure that things are secure and things are safe and things are being done correctly. I mean, it's a big deal, and the safety part of that is huge too. In security, but yeah.
yeah,
So you were in a very serious profession. So
no,
and so
yeah,
obviously they saw your potential. Yeah.
exactly. And you kind of hit on a perfect point. I mean, the stuff that I was able to experience while doing those jobs I mean, it was absolutely amazing. I mean, obviously for security purposes, I can't go into detail about it, but to see just to like you said, the big picture of what we were dealing with and how to, go about it was absolutely amazing. So 3 years in Italy passed, and all my friends are getting these nice bases to like Florida, California, New Mexico, Texas, all this. I was like, cool. You know what? I've been overseas for almost 5 years. Let me roll the dice. I'm gonna go back home. So I'm like, all right, maybe I'll get a base. And everybody else is getting all these cool bases. Why not me, right? Well, that was, I failed to realize I work at the pleasure of the United States Air Force and not the pleasure of myself or whatever, or everybody else. And I got stationed at the wonderful tropical Minot Air Force Base, North Dakota. Now,
Yep, it's very tropical.
we always talked about, oh, why not? And it had a reputation of being the worst base in the Air Force. Those northern tier bases, Minot, Malmstrom, all those bases up there in the northern Midwest, but it wasn't horrible. But I'm not a fan of the cold, so it wasn't great either.
Right.
So,
well, do you have any good stories about UFOs that you're able to talk about? Or
I mean, I didn't. I mean, I'll be honest. Up there, you put your jacket on and you don't leave the bar, kind of thing, if you want to stay warm. So, but it wasn't horrible. Same thing. We all know Minot. If Minot is a nuclear enterprise. We have a nuclear enterprise up there as well. So I went there, became another response force member, fire team leader, and continue to grow up there. I went to Airman Leadership School, or what I know you guys, and I think in the Marine Corps associate that as non-commissioned officer school. So finally went, got my schooling in to be officially be able to supervise. And then I was also fortunate enough to go to the Department of Defense Military Work and Dog Handlers course in Lackland Air Force Base, Texas.
nice.
Went out to the handlers course for 3 months, came back, had orders to the base in North Carolina. I can't remember. Seymour Johnson.
I flew in there once on active duty.
Yeah. Good old Goldsboro, North Carolina, I guess. But
yeah. Well, hey, as far as the training that you're doing, whether it's leadership training or skills specific training with the Air Force, was your experience that they were pushing you to those schools, or
yes.
were you having to really kind of fend for yourself and make sure that you got the opportunity, or is it a kind of a mix?
So the Air Force, I mean, you got to kind of push for some of your training, but then when it came to Airman Leadership School and things like that, I was a fast promoter to E4, but it took me in the Air Force to promote to E5. It's all testing. It's written testing. You test on Air Force knowledge as well as your job knowledge. So you got like 7 books to read, and I think we all know my passion for reading is better than anybody else's. But it took me 3 times to promote to E5. So I was more of that senior E4, but at E4 you can go to the Airman Leadership School after you get some time under your belt. And I was lucky that I had a master sergeant who was one of my within my chain of command that was like, hey, I got to get you to ALS. You need to get to ALS. I don't care whether you make E5 or not, you're going to go to ALS. So having that circle of influence, if you want to say, was absolutely awesome. I had a lot of people within my circle of influence that said, hey, he needs to do this. He needs to get there to this. We need to get him to this. And on my 3rd time, I was able to get a line number for E5. And when they consider your time and grade and time and service, my line number was probably like 1 or something like that, because I was within the first 30 days of promotion. So, so I got my line number. Things were good. I went to canine school down in Lackland, which was absolutely an amazing experience. I didn't realize, how much how much detail they really put into that school, especially with, you got, it's all joint forces. So you got experience from across all the branches. And it was really cool. You kind of feel kind of dumb when you're doing dog corrections on a ammo can before you get on a dog, but it's well worth it. But you're standing there outside in an open field while all these like active duty members are walking past you, and you're yanking on a leash attached to an ammo can, yelling no at the ammo can like it is a dog. But it definitely made it wild. It definitely really made you better and made you understand the basics before you put your hands on this living creature that you're ultimately responsible for.
Right.
Lackland Air Force Base houses about 950 dogs for training. All those dogs are pretty much dogs that are not qualified to go out to the fleet services or in the Air Force, they call it the flight, things like that. So they're all your fail out dogs. So it was fun in the Texas heat, going out there about 5 o'clock in the morning and about 90 degrees, and you got 950 dogs in runs, and they haven't been out of their kennels in about 12 hours. So,
oh, geez.
the smells of the day were definitely interesting. We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, that's the first thing I was thinking about.
But it was fun.
A little smellier than an ammo can, right?
Yeah. And not all those dogs were neat dogs. We'll just call it that. They like to spread their stuff around.
Oh, gee whiz.
Yeah. But then after dog school, I got back up to Minot. And I always made a promise to myself when I joined the military, and I'd said this a lot when I was in the military, because people were like, oh, are you going to stay in? You're going to retire? And I said, I'm going to stay in as long as I'm having fun. And I got up to Minot back from dog school, and I realized I wasn't having fun anymore in the military. The military wasn't fun for me. I didn't enjoy it. And I think a lot of it had to do with location, but also a lot of it had to do with poor leadership. I had my orders to North Carolina, and my commander was pretty much like, we need you here. You're not going. And if any of you who know me, or the old saying, be seen, not heard, let's just say I was very much heard at that point instead of just seen. But the Air Force also too, I think, like the Marine Corps, and we've had in these past discussions, was downsizing in 2014. Particularly my career field, they had to cut something like 13,000 security forces members within 2 years, and they were offering incentive programs to get out, meaning, hey, we'll give you X amount of money based off of this math equation to get out. So I ran the math, and it came out to a very well worth amount of money, and I really did some soul searching at that point and stayed true to myself, my promise that I made to myself. When I'm not, as soon as I stop having fun, I'm going to get out. So I did.
Well, and Ryan, to that, I mean, there's a lot kind of packed into that, right? When we all leave those who serve in the military, we all leave at some point, right? That's an inevitability. And yeah, having leadership that's, not the best can absolutely sway you to make a decision on whether, do I really like doing this? Now, sometimes you can see an end, right? And so you just kind of put your head down and you bull through it and you make it work. But other times it's harder because of maybe where you are in space and time, and being up there in Minot, there's probably not a whole lot going on up there, and so it's kind of hard to get away from, and that's kind of a reason why I asked you about, what is the Air Force like in general when it comes to getting you trained, going to these schools. I know my experience in the Marine Corps, the Marine Corps is absolutely big on leadership training, right? So going to NCO school is a requirement, and you want your folks to go. But some of these other schools, you have commanders that are like, can't afford to send you right now. That was never, I always sucked it up and sent my folks, because that's how they, when you get your folks trained, they're educated. And they come back, if they come back to your unit, then it's going to be good for your unit, which means it's good for the Marine Corps. So you do those things. But when you put a tag on people and tell them, no, you can't go because you're needed here. I mean, okay, that's kind of nice, right? Because it means I must be doing okay. But on the flip side of that, it's not cool because you need to go to these courses for a career progression, or you've served your time and it's time to go on to that next thing, whatever it is. And that's also career progression, because sometimes you go to something that's outside of your occupational specialty. And in the Marine Corps, we call that a B billet. A billet is your primary, B billet is something you go to that's a career broadening tour. It's outside of what you do normally. And it helps broaden your capabilities and give you a larger perspective of what the Marine Corps does. And it makes you a better asset down the road. So yeah, it's tough when leadership kind of makes the decision for you in terms of how you perceive and what you actually see is happening in your unit. And that's a tough decision to have to make.
Yeah. And, kind of getting into we talk about the leadership, especially, we've time and time again, we've talked about, even on this show and other portions of Powerhouse Story, we talk about bad leadership and bad, things like that. And one of the things I was young, I never really saw the big picture to things, but I think, and I've talked to people within my department that actually retired out of the Air Force during that time as well. And, they all said the same thing. They had leadership that was doing things that just was, completely irresponsible at that point. Like, they were forcing out airmen because they had a rip in their personnel file, but they're spending millions of dollars on, air shows. I mean, if you really look at the big picture of things, what is an air show? It's a recruiting tool. So, a buddy of mine at work, he was saying, he goes, we're forcing out 50 airmen out of our squadron because they got rips in their personnel file, but yet they're planning a, $3.5 billion air show to, use as a recruiting tool. So it's like, he even said the same thing. He thought it was very irresponsible at that time.
Right.
But kind of looking back now and being able to see the big picture, I think when it came to all that leadership stuff, it was, we were in a transition of generation as well. I mean, the colonels, lieutenant colonels, your generals, they were all probably your Gen Z or Gen Y, kind of people, your Gen X's. And then you have the millennials coming in that were a different breed of people. They were, they wanted to use their brains instead of being more hands-on. And, a lot of to understand the deeper root of, what we're doing and why we're doing it. So, seeing the bigger picture, I think there may have been a disconnection between your, lower rank and file to your, upper, echelon officers. And
Yeah, that's a great point. And before I want to follow up to something that I saw Sarah, put up on the screen. I thought the same thing. Some folks may want to understand a term that you use, but to address what you just said, change management is a big deal, and change management, outside of the military is something that's done pretty well. Change management within the military, not so much. I spent 3 years as a change agent in the Marine Corps during OIF, kind of in the middle of it, the beginning to the mid part of it. And the change management piece that I'm going to talk to here briefly is changing out the Marine Corps logistics system, getting rid of all the old data systems that we use for ordering and tracking and delivery, swapping that out with a brand new system, and then bringing in what we call bridging technologies that would advance our ability to see in the supply chain, from order origination to when it finally gets delivered to the foxhole, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so getting folks to understand what that change, hey, change is coming, and they didn't give a damn because they were fighting a war. The only thing they cared about was, hey, we just got back from Iraq, and we have a little bit of downtime, but then we're going to get right back into the training pipeline again, getting ready to go. And so they didn't want to hear about all this great stuff coming. That they were commanders like, what can you do for me now? Whatever. So yeah, the change piece on that is huge, and it really can't be ignored. the Marine Corps is an institution that, we are huge on history. You've got to know your history as a Marine, and you've got to adjust to the Marine Corps. Marine Corps doesn't adjust to you. Oh, that sounds good. But if you have folks that are coming in that don't think like you generationally, I mean, that's always going to be an issue for any service. But I think you've got a great point here, because I think the change in the generation that you're referring to is a bigger change because of the technology advances that weren't really impacting previous generations, at least the speed of technology and what you're dealing with technology wise. So you have to be willing to look at that and then talk about, hey, how are we going to adjust what we're doing, not compromise what we're doing, but make it a little easier to connect with these folks and to maybe be willing to entertain questions, right? Because without getting too much further down the weeds here, I always looked at it as, I don't mind if somebody asks me a question. I think that's a good thing, because either I wasn't clear enough, or they really want buy-in. And absolutely, I mean, that's fine, and if you're willing to go there, then you're going to secure folks in terms of getting them on board with what needs to be done. If it's this, okay, go take that hill. Well, yeah, sometimes that's going to happen, and you don't need all the details. Just make it happen. Other times you need to be more thoughtful in how you're addressing folks, because the more they know, then the more they're going to be able to ensure that you're getting what you're asking for. So yeah, that whole thing I think is absolutely true. And we're seeing it across the military, not just, in the Air Force specifically. Now, Sarah put in, what is a RIP? Are you saying RIP or riff when you talk about
RIP?
Right. So can you explain this briefly to folks that might not understand what that is?
It's just, I mean, we refer to it. I mean, I guess it's just the New York in me, but it's it's just been a slang term I've always used for a disciplinary action, letter of reprimand or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
So,
check. Okay.
So kind of getting back, like I said, I had that. So I decided to get out. I stayed true to my promise to myself, which I thought was very important to me. I got out. I think what fortunately for me though, is I was smart enough to plan. I didn't just hit the get out button right away and just go. I was like, all right, I'm going to get out. Let me, give myself a window. I planned out like 6 months to a year. And I knew I was going to become a cop, or wanted to become a cop, when I got out. I had decided that when I wanted to get out. So I already started throwing applications out there, calling people, but it was, realizing that I didn't realize how long hiring processes were for police departments and public service. I thought it was like, oh, I'm in the military, let me just drop an application, I'll get hired. I was wrong.
Quite often that's the case. Yep.
Some of the, even still now, some of the hiring processes can take up to 6 months, almost to a year. So throw a little caveat in there, and I'll come back to it here in a little bit, is I actually tested for the NYPD before I left for the military, just for the heck of it. So made my plan, I got out, and I was fortunate enough to where I had my electrician's background, because I did a vocational school my last 2 years, my junior and senior year in high school, where I would spend half my day in school, actually at my high school, and then the other half of my day I was in a vocational school learning how, electrical work and how to be an electrician.
Yeah, we need more of those, quite frankly.
100% agree. So I was fortunate where I had that background, and I was obviously fortunate enough where I had my dad, who was retired out of Local 3 in New York City, came down here in Charleston, and we were working a little bit. So I got out, came home here to South Carolina. I moved in with mom and dad, which was not necessarily a bad thing because I saved some money, but took about a month off just to decompress, recharge the batteries, and, kind of get into a good mindset to, get ready to do some stuff. And then went over down to the Union Hall here, got sworn in, joined, and took a work ticket, on like day 32, I was back to work. So it was great. And while I really enjoyed being an electrician and doing that job, because you really get to see your projects come together from beginning to end, it just, and I considered doing it for a career and, going back doing my apprenticeship and stuff, but it just wasn't where I wanted to be. I actually worked on the airport renovation and expansion here in Charleston at the international airport. So it's cool now every time I go to the airport and say, hey, I put that in there. Hey, I know what that's doing and why it's doing. Like, so it's really cool to see your work at work pretty much, for all these people coming through the airport specifically.
Right. Well, Chris, now, so in saying that, what was, and I know you're going to tell us, what that was, but was it a sense of purpose that was different? Was that, hey, I really had a sense of purpose in the Air Force, and now that I'm out, I'm doing this. I like what I'm doing, but something's missing. What was that?
I'm a very routine, structured kind of person.
You're a guy.
And I developed that obviously through my time in the military. The military had changed me to be, changed me in different ways definitely for the better, but it definitely gave me a sense of routine, sense of structure, a sense of the way I found that I wanted to live my life. And like I said, I had already decided I wanted to be a police officer because it's that paramilitary organization. It's that, structure and routine, but it was also the quality of life. My quality, like I said, while I love doing the job and I do enjoy it, and I think I'm pretty good at it, it was the coworkers and the people I was around. Like I surrounded myself for 6.5 years with, the best Americans in the world, because we were in the military. And that was my opinion of everybody in the military. We are the best Americans in the world and you are the best people in the world because we are willing to go ahead and do something that was bigger than ourselves. And it was, like I said, the people I was around. And, if you've been around construction for any period of time, you learn very quickly that you're not necessarily around some of the best people of society. And I'm not knocking those people for their life choices. It just wasn't the kind of people that I wanted to be around within my life on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
So it was different for a while, but I was fortunate enough where I got hired on with my first agency, got back into police work and started doing it again. And I really enjoyed and that's the thing, like we have, like just as a police department, you have in the military, is the camaraderie. And a lot of the times when you hear people getting out of even police work, they may say, or most of them I've actually heard say is, I don't necessarily miss the job, I miss the people. And it's definitely, when you have the opportunity to work and surround yourself with great coworkers, it makes any job easy, in my opinion. So that was one of the biggest struggles I had. Was I didn't necessarily lose a sense of myself, but I lost a sense of like what I really wanted out of life as a professional. So, and this kind of
that makes perfect sense. Absolutely.
So this kind of comes back now full fold, where the first agency I got hired from, I was terminated for allegations of untruthfulness during an internal affairs investigation. So again, fortunate enough, I have my electrician's background. I think I turned my gear and everything in at like 10:30 on a Friday, and actually like by 9 o'clock that Friday morning, I already had a job ticket in my pocket to go out to the steel mill down here. So I was very fortunate enough that I took the time to really learn a skill outside of law enforcement. And again, I got out of law enforcement. I was like, hey, you know what? Maybe I'll give this a real chance now. Because at first I was like, it's nice. I don't have any stress. I don't have any liability. I don't have to worry about being sued. I don't have to worry about coming to work and making a split second decision and it being wrong. So at first, like all that stress was like just lifted off and great, not having it. I was just a normal guy going to work every day in my pickup truck, packing my lunch, coming home, and I was
Joe Sixpack. Yeah.
yeah, I was just a regular, a regular person. And then about that time, after that started feeling good, things kind of turned for me again. And I was like, of course, I have the stress of, with that allegation of termination, I'm still in a legal battle with the agency through an administration court with our academy to fight for my police certification, because that was not something I was just willing to give up and let go because
Right.
somebody said I did something. Because I always wanted to have that fallback, if you will, again, if I, so chose to go back. So I'm still dealing with the stress of that, but at that point in time is where a lot of the stuff that I experienced on the job started to fizzle up and boil over, because I didn't have the opportunity to just go, all right, I got to get back to work. I got to pack it away. I'll deal with this later. I'll deal with how I'm feeling later. Just pack it away, move on. So a lot of the trauma stuff actually started to fizzle up. And then again, to turn around to where I was surrounded by crappy coworkers. I mean, to the point where I had people tell me that they wouldn't work with me because I was a cop prior to coming back to electrical work. That was the kind of people,
Wow.
And growing up in New York, I didn't really experience a lot of the, social issues that are going on in the world either. But like I had a boss tell me that he didn't want me on his crew because I was white. Like that was like how bad it was down here working as an electrician in a union, mind you.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, the union part to that is kind of a big deal too. That's I mean, there's politics, unfortunately, almost everywhere you go now in life. That part of the American experience has become ugly, and yeah, that's unfortunate. So Ryan, we're at 11:42, so we've got about 18 minutes till we're at our hour point. Um, so you talked a bit about kind of your why, as to getting into the police force. Comparing different aspects of your life career wise, and why you chose to go in. So, being a police officer, uh, I liken it to service in the military. In the Marine Corps, we talk to honor, courage, and commitment. And I absolutely see those same things in police officers, in law enforcement. Those three tenets, I think, are universal for folks like us, because it matters. And having people who are willing to serve the communities, like folks in law enforcement or other first responders, that's huge. I mean, we have to have that as a society, because without people like you, things turn upside down very quickly, and we go back to the dark ages. And so I want to thank you. I probably should have done this on the front end. I want to thank you for your service as a police officer, because you guys are integral. We can't have a society, a functioning society in an economy, without folks who are willing to every day wear the badge and do all the things that come with being a police officer, because it's multifaceted. It absolutely is. So, Ryan, your time as a police officer, where you are now, and I kind of touched a little bit on, and you did too, about how people perceive police now. Can you share with us what give us an example of your involvement as a police officer with a person, or a group, or whatever, where you helped somebody in need and it was impactful, not only to them but to you? Can you give us an example of that?
Yeah. So, and this is actually fairly recent. A few months back, I actually had somebody stop me in the grocery store, and he says, "Hey, are you Burke?" I said, well, copping me. Who are you? And he goes, "Oh, I'm so and so." And the name sounded familiar. I said, "Yeah." He goes, "You're a cop, right?" I said, "Yeah." He's like, "At Hanahan," which was my first agency. I said, "No, I'm not there anymore. I'm over here in Somerville." And he goes, "Oh, okay." He goes, "Do you remember me?" I said, "Not really. To be honest with you. I mean, not really. I don't remember at all." He goes, "Well, and mind you, this was probably my interaction with him 2019. No, no, excuse me, 2016. And he's like, well, I'm so-and-so, you arrested me for possession of heroin. I said, oh, okay. Well, about that point, like, I'm like, kind of
Yeah,
like,
what's coming now? Yeah.
step back, and I'm like, put my hand behind my back where I got my gun on the small of my back. And I'm like, all right, this is about to go south,
Go
isn't it?
south. Yeah.
He goes, and he looked completely different. This guy looked great from the last time I saw him. And he says to me, he goes, I just want you to know, when you arrested me, you saved my life.
Mm.
I said, what? Like, I was very caught off guard and confused. He goes, you saved my life. I said, how did I save your life? He goes, I put you in jail. I was very open. I was like, I put you in jail. I said, how does that save your life? He goes, I have not used heroin since the time you've arrested me and I got out of jail. And I said, oh. And I said, I was like, wow. Like, and that, like, of course, now my demeanor and my approach has completely changed. I'm like, that's amazing. I'm like, I was like, great to hear that. I said, so what are you doing with your life? And come to find out, he's actually in the local down here at the IBW. I just haven't had the
Oh,
opportunity
wow.
to see him on a job site. He's in the local. He's a journeyman now. He's making a ton of money, and he's getting ready to get married and all that stuff like that. So that was that was impactful, not only for him, but actually for me, to really see, putting somebody in jail saves their lives. And I was like, at first I'm like, yeah, whatever. But hearing what the effects of that, it was pretty cool.
No, absolutely. I mean, think about the trajectory he was on if he wouldn't have been, pulled aside, whatever however he was arrested, whatever that scenario, however that took place, he would probably be dead now. It's not uncommon that, folks that are into drugs like that overdose, or because of the criminal element involved, with getting the stuff, other folks that use, it's just, I mean, there's just nothing good about it, right? And the other thing is, it's a good thing he was wise enough to make the right decision once he was arrested. But to have someone come back and tell you that's pretty enlightening.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was probably one of the most amazing, stories I've heard from somebody I've ever dealt with. I mean, it was absolutely awesome. So
Now that's a good news story. So let's do this. Let's do, conversely, let's look at, and it doesn't have to be the past 2 years, but I think there's probably a lot that's happened, in the past 2 years across the world, certainly with COVID. But then also, attitudes changing in terms of how people are perceiving folks that serve in the police force. And a lot of that's not good, right? I mean, even the military, people are starting to view military service a little differently. I think there's politics rolled into both of these things, without getting political, but I do think that politics is absolutely part of, what we're seeing with a degradation in people's view on law enforcement and the military. So looking at the past 2 years, I know it's been tough for police officers. You see it everywhere. Attacks and murders of police are hugely on the upswing. That's a significant problem. It's a deadly problem, and we have to figure out what to do about this. But what can you share from your personal perspective? Any story that you feel comfortable sharing, that you can address some of that.
So where I'm at, first off, South Carolina in general, I mean, it's a very conservative state, politically.
Right.
So generally speaking, actually down here, specifically where I'm at, we've actually have definitely more support for us than we do against us.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been very, very, makes us able to go out and do our job a lot better and more efficiently. But seeing some of these police killings and things like that I mean, it is definitely, I mean, I mourn the death of any officer I hear that has been killed in the line of duty, whether it's openly or just internally, or like, you know, I say to myself, holy heck, this not again kind of thing. So,
Right.
but it's definitely, I mean, it's there, and it's, the for us specifically in South Carolina, when we try and realize one thing is, particularly with all these political groups and all these people that are out to hurt law enforcement, we have to really remember where we came from back in, from the start of things, and, specifically here in Charleston, we have a significantly large African American culture here in South Carolina. And if you do the research and if you really look back into things, here in the Charleston, South Carolina area, particularly back, during the slavery days, all law enforcement was to make sure slaves didn't run away. And, and if they did, pretty much it was, handle it, so we have a lot of rich history here in the Charleston area, whether it's family history or, U.S. history. There's a lot of rich history in this area.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely is.
And
Charleston's an amazing city, but you're right. There's absolutely history that folks need to understand.
And as we progressed as a career, I mean, and if you really, and I'm always a big believer in history, and we always come from where we started, and history tends to repeat itself. And I've always said that with the current climate we're in right now is a very similar climate we were in during the Rodney King riots. And if you look at it from a perspective of specifically what only an area I could speak of intelligently is the area that I work in, is that back even during like, Jim Crow laws and, segregation, cops would put people in their trunks, drive them around, drop them off and say, all right, get the hell out of here. I mean, that was the culture of law enforcement back in the day here, like back during that time. And then you moved into the, 70s and, and 80s where we had the Rodney King riots. The culture of law enforcement was like that beat and release mentality. And, again, you're coming back to an area where we have a lot of rich family culture among everybody that lives here, whether, it's, your white communities, your African American communities, your Hispanic communities. There's a lot of rich culture in this area. I mean, I can't tell you how many areas in my jurisdiction we have where the entire street is all family and they've been there for 200 years. So we have to remember that, and that, so then we fast forward into, early 2000s and where we at now, where we're seeing a lot of the issues that we ran into, George Floyd, Kim Potter, all those where, I mean, I think if any cop in the world, I think that does the job honorably and with integrity would probably share the same opinions that I probably have about Eric Chauvin. But we have to consider that, one thing, I watch a lot of Blue Bloods, and one thing that Tom Selleck always says in that show is take a walk in the other man's shoes. So when we're talking about the issues between the community and law enforcement, you have to think about when we have a lot of people with rich family histories, their great grandparents are telling these stories to their kids, and they're telling their stories to their kids, and they're telling these stories to their kids, and so forth. And now those stories are getting to the all those stories and everything that's happened to them are getting to the generation we're dealing with now. So what would I expect to be perceived as? I mean, that's just the bottom line.
Well, perception becomes reality. Perception is reality. Absolutely.
These family members are saying, well, this happened to me, and it's a constant rolling a constant rolling trajectory of bad interactions or bad experiences. It's becomes a very valid point to what people, specifically down here are arguing and why they're arguing what they're arguing, specifically these police shootings, and police brutality and things like that. And, we can't just look at the single incident maybe that fueled the one protest, we have to look at it as a whole and take a walk in the other person's shoes and say, okay, let's have the conversation. Like you and I have always said, have a conversation about it and tell me about what we could do better. So, while I've had great support from the community I work with, and we're definitely more supported than hated, I can definitely see on the other aspects of the people who don't like us in our area and why they don't. And to me, that's a very important thing is, you don't know where you're going until you've seen where you came from, kind of thing.
Right. Well, you said a lot there that certainly is specific to your area, but you can take that and multiply it across the map to other parts of the country where it's not necessarily the same history, but the impact of that history and how folks have been treated over time, that stuff, it travels again generationally, and there are folks that are telling stories. And so naturally, it's not uncommon to think that folks are going to have a different view of police officers. And that's unfortunate. You can't ignore the history that you talked about. And that's one thing I think the younger culture is really messing up. They're trying to stamp out the history because of what the history meant to them. I mean, I understand that, right? But I think we also know from a longer view that you have to maintain history, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Because if you don't, then you do a disservice to future generations, because you have to know about the bad things that happened just as much as you need to know about the good things that happened. So when you look at our history, you look at the American experience, there's a lot of goodness to us leaving the English, right? The crown, because of the whole dynamic in terms of, government and, freedoms and things that folks back then sacrificed for. Now, certainly, slavery was, a part of the American experience back then, and it was for years to come. It was resolved, for lack of a better word, through a civil war, but it didn't end there in the South, right? You had a lot of bad actors that kind of continued that under a different name, right? And so, without getting into all that, and it is generational, and it is like Tom Selleck says in the show, walking in another man's shoes, whatever that, however he says it, it's a common phrase. It is so true. Just like, to your point, when you look at the younger folks coming in the military, vice the older generations, and how there's conflict there, and how, they just don't understand each other. And if you're not willing to listen, if you're not willing to see someone else's perspective, then you're not going to get anywhere, because life isn't all about do what I say now. It's, how do we make things better? And we make things better through listening to each other and to allowing someone to have a voice, and to really, and to hear, right? You can listen, but are you hearing what's being said? And then once you hear, what do you do about it? That's really the defining thing, is what actions are you willing to take to make things better? And the police officers that get that are probably the ones that are more successful, right? Because they're willing to want to talk with people that are on their beat, to listen, to figure out, hey, how can I get into this community to where they're going to see me as someone they can trust? They can see me that I'm here, to do good. I'm here to help them, to protect them, not to be in here doubting everyone that I come across, or have a certain perspective about this group of people, so yeah, that's a huge part, and a tough part about being a police officer, because it's not just about upholding the law, right? That's a very specific thing, but the nuances that come with communication and interacting with people, not everyone gets that. And those are probably the police officers that cause problems for people in the community and their perceptions of what policing is. And yeah, that's a tough thing to deal with, especially the hatred piece, because there's absolutely, now some folks are just, they're going to hate, right? They'd say, haters are going to be haters, but what you spoke to is absolutely larger than that, right? It's a big thing to figure out and to try to do better on.
It's just one of those things where, this job is never going to be about us individually as an officer. It's always going to be something bigger than what we are, and that's one thing I try and instill on a lot of my new guys is this is always going to be something bigger than what you ever will be or what you are. And make sure that, like, I think I just saw it go up in the comments, is you're not going to be able to save everybody, you're not going to be able to change everybody, but I don't know the exact numbers, but I think it's fairly significantly high. But I think it's more than 75% of Americans have never had an interaction with law enforcement. So when you do have that interaction with somebody, you need to treat it as if it's their very first interaction with a law enforcement officer in general, whether you've dealt with this person 100 times or you've never seen this person a day in your life. The people you've never seen before is definitely the ones you need to treat like they have never had an interaction with law enforcement before, because your interaction is going to make or break their perception. And then their perception, they're going to take that and go tell their friends, and they're going to go tell their kids, and they're going to go tell everything else. They're going to use their circle of influence to influence other people's perception of what law enforcement is as a whole, instead of, like, if I treated somebody badly, it's not going to be, Ryan Burke treated this person badly. It's going to be XYPD, it treats people badly. So it's
Right.
every interaction, one interaction at a time, one person at a time, we can try and maybe help bridge that gap. But it's, it takes something way bigger than what we are as a person, or as a single cop to change that perception.
Right. That's very well said, and it's so true. And and then the other part about policing is, whatever the math comes out to percentage wise, there is a portion of the populace that you deal with that are the dregs of society, and they don't give a damn. And for whatever reason, it doesn't matter. They're just going to do what they do, background, whatever it may be. There are folks that just are going to break the law, and it's in your face, and they don't care. And that's a shame. It's terrible that they got to that point in their lives. Doesn't matter, because they're out there and they're doing the things that they do, and you guys have to deal with them. So
Right.
if most of your interface is with people that are like that, man, the pressure and the stress and becoming jaded is probably something that a lot of folks battle with. I've got to remain human in my interactions with these folks that are maybe subhuman, because of they don't care anymore. They, for whatever reason, and they're hardened criminals, and they're going to be that way unless some amazing thing happens, like the gentleman that you referred to earlier that was addicted to drugs, and he was arrested, and then something changed in him. But that's usually not the case, right? Those stories are probably few and far between in terms of the hardcore element that police are dealing with in a lot of areas in our country. So yeah, I can see where that's a battle for the soul of humanity, because you want to feel like you're making a difference. You get up every morning and you go out. No one goes out with the intent, how can I screw things up today? No one does that, right? I mean, there are some bad actors everywhere we go, but you want to be purposeful. You want your interactions to be meaningful. You want to, you're to protect and serve, right? That's the serve part of this. Is just like when you leave the military. I found that so many people have this capacity to want to serve, whether it's in the career path that they choose, or in that space and time when they're not at their desk doing their job, where they can help in the community, whatever that might be. The volunteering part that comes, I think, through what you do in the military, or even, in the police force as well, that service aspect. So yeah, balancing all that and remembering, why am I doing this? What is the purpose of policing? Yeah, that's got to be a very difficult thing. I've said this, previously. I don't. I could probably do it, but just sitting back and thinking about it, I don't think I would have the patience for it. I've become patient over time, because I'm married, I have daughters, and was in the Marines for about 21 years, and so I wasn't patient when I was younger. I've absolutely developed that skill, but when I look at what policing involves, God bless you guys. I mean, and I mean that with all of my heart. I think that would be very difficult to do for anybody, and then to get up in the next day and strap it on and go out there with a positive attitude. I think that says a lot about the folks that do this and are successful at doing it.
I appreciate that. Yeah. And it's not easy some days, but it's definitely, I tell people that I don't work. I don't work a day in my life when you enjoy what you do. And for sure, as I don't work a day in my life, that's 100% accurate for me.
Well, Ryan, the folks that are, in your little part of South Carolina are blessed to have you, as are all of us who are blessed to have men and women like you that are serving and making a difference, and have the background and perspective that you bring to policing. I think that's huge. You've got a big heart, and you've got a wide aperture for being in that other person's shoe. Everything you just said absolutely resonates, and I hope that is indicative of most of our folks, the vast majority of folks that serve, are serving probably for reasons like why you're doing what you're doing. Well, believe it or not, it's 8 after, so we've been doing this about an hour and 8 minutes. So at this point, unless there's something that you didn't get to share and you want to talk about, we can do that. If not, I want to kind of switch gears here a bit, because we do have folks that are here listening and may have questions or comments that they want to go to. So if you're good with that, we'll go ahead and transition to that part of the discussion.
Yeah, I just want to put one thing in there.
Sure.
And this is more of a CYA from from myself and all parties involved, that any political views, opinions, or statements that are provided within this session is not a direct reflection or any kind of, or reflect in any kind of way amongst my agency or myself as a professional. Just to put that.
Yeah, no, understood. No, and you're wise for saying that, right? This is you as a person in the discussions here. So no, that's a good point. Okay, well, with that, I want to turn to my cohort here and awesome person, Sarah Carrell. Sarah, this has been a good one. They all are, right? What are some of your thoughts here?
Oh gosh, this was great. Ryan, thank you. Ryan is like a very loved person on our first responder group. And in fact, most of my favorite law enforcement or retired law enforcement are on this call, on the planet are on this call. I have to say, Ryan, I really appreciate your sensitivity to looking at the bigger picture and kind of understanding the why, like even the transgenerational trauma that David actually brought up too, it's trauma, isn't it? It's trauma. It's like these physiological responses to something that maybe happened a generation ago or through another story or a bad interaction. And it's a tough thing to deal with. And I feel for both parties. I feel for the officers, so many that are so great, really out there, very protective, and yet have to deal with something that they really have no control over, So just your sensitivity on this issue was impressive. I appreciate it. And then I also think too, we have just really loved you in our group. And I think about the things that you have gone through where you could have really become bitter and you never could have come up that other side, dealing with an accusation, and then going to another job where there is a prejudice against you because you were, a police officer and your color. But you're just somebody that just stays curious and stays open and keeps growing. And so as a human being, I really appreciate you. And I appreciate that we have a law enforcement officer like you.
I appreciate
So
it.
thank you so much.
That means a lot. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Sarah. I always enjoy your insights, and just like with being associated with other people in groups, there's some things that you'll catch, and some things that you won't catch when you hear things. And it's always good to hear your perspective on, how this comes across to you and your background. So I appreciate, as always, your wise comments, and you get right to the heart of the matter about, I think, things that are core to being human and are essential in our interactions with folks, and that's much appreciated. So, Sarah, can you lead us now in the Q&A part?
Yeah. Does anybody have a comment or a question?
Can we take a quick 30 seconds from, I got to do something real quick.
Oh, sure. We can get
Yeah,
our lineup
absolutely.
while he's gone, huh? So yeah, Scott can't see the hands up, and that's why I help him with this part. So if anybody has a comment or question, then I can put your hand up or, whatever to get my attention. So.
Yeah, and like Carol was saying, I'm on my cell phone. Where I live, it's just better on my cell service than my internet, unfortunately. So you have a limited screen. So I appreciate that, Sarah.
Oh, that's fine. And then so Chris Gregorio has his hand up for whenever Ryan is ready.
Ryan he better have it strapped on and ready if Chris is going to ask a question here.
Yeah.
Making sure, is my microphone working?
Oh, it's
Yeah, you're good.
Okay,
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you.
What's up, brother?
How are you, brother? How's everything going?
Oh, it's going well, all things considered. I got that bug that's been floating around for 2 years, and getting through it. But hey, I think there's been a lot of folks praying for me. I know I was doing the same, but
You made it through the other side, bro. You made it through the other side.
All right.
Yeah, that's right.
Here. What do we got?
All right.
So, Ryan, I guess I get to start, bro. So let me first start by saying how much I appreciate and admire your resilience and your fortitude. It's such a young part in your career. It's such a young guy. As a guy who's been doing this for about 18 years now, I didn't find that type of resilience until much, much later in my career. And it's very easy to get bitter with all the, you see the negative stuff all the time. What is the advice that you can give other young guys and gals that are starting out at this career, we'll say sub 10 years, to build that resiliency and to choose to stay happy and grounded in this career and to have the perspective that's so open like you have?
That's a great question.
Yeah. I would first and foremost say is that it's never as bad as it appears. Obviously, I've had to, go through the bottom and back with fighting for my certifications and things like that. When I knew I was right in the right, and I knew I didn't, do anything to jeopardize myself. It's never as bad as it sometimes appears. And I think one thing that I didn't do very early on in my career, which obviously that's not really something that would be expected to me, was be able to see the big picture. I was just, all right, I'm told this, go do that. Don't worry about it. Or like, all right, I'm going to do this because this is what I was told. Now, I think one thing I was very fortunate enough is that we have specifically where I'm at and where my place, my employer is, that we have a vast amount and of people just at the PFC or one stripe level or whatever you guys call them in your end. Is we have people from 25 years to no years on the job. So we have that or that peer mentorship at the rank and file level without having to seek that mentorship from the supervisors. I have somebody I work with where I could say, okay, hey brother, let me run this by. What do you think as patrol officer so-and-so? And then what would you tell me as your previous experience as sergeant so-and-so? And I would get both perspectives. And I think that's important. And I think anywhere is you need to find peer-to-peer mentorship just as much as you need to find that mentorship from supervision, from your leadership, to help with that resiliency, to help be able to see bigger picture, to help to see it from a different perspective, and not be intimidated by the people who have the 20 years experience. I would highly suggest you latch on to those people as a young officer and let them guide you and, really pick their brains, because I don't think there's any cop out there, or I would say any cop out there that, who has that amount of experience that wouldn't pass it along if somebody did, asked for it. So definitely, seek out peer-to-peer mentorship that's outside of just your supervision. And then the other thing I would say is definitely, find your circle of influence. Okay. Whether it's just the people you work side by side with, or, people you can trust, find that circle of influence and let them kind of guide you in the sense of being like, hey, Chris is a good dude. I really trust him. I know if I talk to him, he's going to shut his mouth and, he's not going to tell anybody about that, and, have that person have that circle of influence where they're influencing people that they know that other people can come to them as well. Because I'm a big believer in, you learn just as much from other people as you do when you're teaching people, if not more.
And if I can tag one more thing on there, how do you suggest and advise people to process all of the horrific and traumatic things that they see? I personally believe that it's not good to keep it all in or whatever. What is your advice to folks coming up, whether they're 5 years or 25 years, to how to process those things so that they don't build up on you? And again, thanks for everything that you do, brother.
Yeah, man. So, I made that mistake of just packing it away, and then obviously it fizzled over, specifically when I got out of law enforcement for that brief time, because I didn't have time to just pack it away and move on to the next job or next call. Don't be afraid. You've preached it yourself, Chris. We're not alone. We're all there for each other. We've all been there for each other. Talk about it with anybody who just sit there and listen. Whether it's trauma or, you don't agree with some orders that are coming down from the command staff and you just want to, vent and, bitch a little, just talk, because just let it out, and, you don't have to go to formal counseling to talk to somebody. You don't have to go see that professional to talk to somebody. We, in this group specifically, Dave, you say the Me Too, that means more to somebody than probably going to see some professional shrink. I'm not a fan of shrink, so I try not to go to them, but talk to anybody who's going to listen, and just make sure when you talk to those people that those are the people who are going to listen and keep their mouth shut.
Yeah, Ryan, I would add something, two things to this as well, in terms of mentors and, having folks that you can go to that you feel safe and trust that, what you say, again, is going to be something that's, held in that tight bond of friendship and respect. Now, the other thing is, sometimes things don't go your way, right? Some things are tough. And there's an absolute difference between how you handle that and what you say to whom, so some of that's a level of maturity too, right? I don't know how many times you hear about folks that wind up, kind of running at the mouth and wind up because they're upset saying things that they really shouldn't say, especially to certain people, right? Because there is a hierarchy, right? And so that's not always easy. There's a way to say things, right? If you feel compelled that you've got to say what you got to say, there's a time and place and there's a way to do it, right? And some of that is just, it's a bit of an art form. You learn, not that it's political, it's just, you learn how to survive, because sometimes you can do or say things that become terminal, because you're not necessarily, using some bit of restraint. And that just, I think that comes with time. But then the other thing is looking at who you talk to. I can tell you, I was absolutely not a fan of counseling or therapy. When my parents divorced, my mom sent my brother and me to see somebody. This guy he was an absolute wackadoodle. He was a nut job. He would sit there and he was popping pills. And I have no idea. I mean, they were prescription, right? But he'd be sitting there, and then he would just wouldn't be paying attention. You'd have to repeat yourself, and then he would tell you something. And I was in 5th grade, and I knew it then that his advice was insane. This was, so that rubbed me the wrong way when it came to, counseling later. But as I become older and I'm a little more willing to put some of that aside, right? My preconceived and my actual experience, to put it aside, to say, you know what, that was just one person who didn't have their act together. And I've heard many folks that are in this field say, look, go to someone different. You might have to go to 3, 4, maybe even 5 until you find that person that you've got a connection with, and that they get you, you get them, and then they're able to help you. So it's not for everybody. I get that, because I was absolutely one of those people. But I would just say on the flip side that it's good to explore your options, and to, be willing to spend some time finding that guy or gal that can help you. And certainly it depends on what the issues are you want to talk to. I mean, some are, very significant issues that have to do with, your well-being, and, hopefully not taking actions to hurt yourself or even end your life, because those are certainly things that happen. Those numbers are higher for police, as they are for the military too. So I'm only saying that is because I think it's important to have options. So okay.
I don't disagree, and that's well said.
Yeah, roger that. Okay. Sarah, who else we got out there? Anyone else? I saw Dave was throwing some percentages up there, and he's always got very good input or, perspective.
And now he has his hand up. So
Yeah, there you go.
No, I just wanted to express my appreciation for Ryan. I think he is, and Chris said it best, at such an early stage in his career, he has such a unbelievable perspective, and a caring heart with a level of directed leadership that I think is unique to Ryan, but I also think it's unique in the field. And going through my own journey, my own career, I have noticed that just because you have a rank on your shoulder or your arm doesn't make you a good leader. And just because you don't have a rank on your arm or your shoulder doesn't mean you can't be one. And I think that regardless of the career that Ryan has from this point forward, I think his ability to lead in the areas that he's passionate about is second to none. And I just appreciate that, and in the work that he's doing. And over the course of the last few months that I've gotten to know Ryan a lot, I know that he's been working very diligently on helping others with not only in his agency, but in the law enforcement community. And I'd love to understand if you'd be interested in explaining that work to the group.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I began my journey in trauma healing, I realized something is, learned something from you guys specifically, is that we don't talk about our trauma enough. And we don't really take a deep dive into what we're seeing or being involved in. So I kind of took a minute, reset, and realized, like, hey, we we're always preaching, like, for example, even with suicide awareness, like suicide awareness, here's the indicators, here's the people to call, here's all the resources. Like, so the awareness is there. And it's the same thing with law enforcement mental health. The awareness is there. But at what point do we actually stop with the awareness and take action and actually do things to better ourselves and get down and dirty and have the conversation and get in the weeds and really get into things? So what I've been doing, and I've reached out to probably every single one of you on this call for resources and advice and things that you guys would see fit to be placed into a lesson plan, and developing a lesson plan for my police department, and hopefully ultimately for the state of South Carolina, to kind of be like tip of the spear to really talk about mental health, spiritual wellness for law enforcement, or first responders in general. But on top of that, kind of as I dove into my research, I realized how important sleep health is, and how one of the major stress indicators for law enforcement or first responders is financial literacy. So I'm incorporating all of that into a lesson plan to hopefully get approved and set up into my police department. I know if some of you want to come down and do trainings for my PD, so maybe we can work that out as well.
I think that goes to a testament. Sorry, Scott. I just want to say, I think that goes to a testament to his heart and his leadership. And that's why I wanted him to talk about it, because I knew that existed. It didn't come up yet. So it just really proves who Ryan is as a person, as a professional. I think that's amazing.
Yeah. Well, David, thank you for asking that question, having that inside perspective or information there, because that does say a lot more about who Ryan is. And Ryan, what you said there was, about taking action part is huge. I mean, that's what it's, you can have all the intent in the world, you can have the best intent, but if folks aren't moving forward and exercising that intent, then it's all for naught. And those things that you mentioned are a big deal, financial literacy, and then, sleep, being able to, they always say, hey, the older you get, the less sleep you need. That's not really true. Sleep is a huge part of who you are the next day, mentally and physically. The lack of sleep over time, they've done studies and where they're monitoring the brain, and you can see highlighted portions of the brain of someone who's had adequate sleep and someone who has not. And, your ability to cope with stress and to make good decisions when you aren't getting sleep, that's, it's there, it's proven. So, being able to take all of those things and put it into a document or, into a program that has folks that understand it, that are putting it into place and bringing folks through and training them and bringing this to their attention to make them better people and better servants is a incredible idea. How long until you're done with that? Are you weeks away, months away?
Well, we all know my passion for reading, so there's no really timeline on that.
Right. Well, the fact that you're doing it again speaks volumes. So that's good stuff.
And for those of you who don't know, I don't have any passion for reading, so it seems to be, every time I talk to somebody, I got a book for you. Well, I appreciate that. Thanks.
Hey, you put it in your car on the audio. You can listen to it, right?
Yeah, I wish they were all audio.
Yeah, yeah. Reading. I've gone through school, and obviously reading's a part of that. Same with military schools, and it just got to where, for me, reading as a pleasure just wasn't something that I did, because I had to read so much, over the years. And some of the stuff you read is like, you do it because you have to, right? And then having the time to sit down and read more. I wasn't one of those guys either. I'm well read, but it wasn't necessarily by choice. Yeah. Okay. Well, do we have anyone else out there? I think Terry had to go after David's question and your answer, Ryan. But if there's anyone else that has any comments, now's the time to do it. We're at about an hour and 30 minutes.
I don't see anybody else's hand up.
Okay. Well, that's good. Well, hey, guys, thanks for being on board today with Ryan, Sarah, and myself. We always love to have folks come on and to take part. The Q&A is always very revealing. And, it's nice that folks take the time to listen and then to hang around at the very end to ask questions or, just to make the comments that you folks do in support of the people who are on this program. And to date, I don't think we've had a person, an interviewee that hasn't absolutely hit it over the fence. We're blessed to have the folks that we have on this show. And Ryan, you are absolutely no exception. Thank you so much for your time today, for wanting to come on to share your story. We have our stories, we share our stories so that they can have impact outside of just the group that we connect with, but to the broader, pardon me, to the broader world. And it's all to help, right? To make us better people and to let folks know that, hey, everyone has a story. We all have challenges, and there's ways that we can do things to make it better in our lives and to also help others. So thank you so much again for your time. And thank you to all of those who protect and serve and our first responders in our country. There's work to do. And thank God we have folks like you, Ryan, and the other folks that are on this call that are doing this. You guys make our country what it is. And thank you so much.
I appreciate it, Scott. Thank you so much.
Yeah, amen, brother. Okay, well, we'll see you guys next week, hopefully. Everyone have a great day and enjoy that weekend coming. Take care.
Thank you.